Hey guys, going to talk about compensatory acceleration training today, C.A.T training for short. Training made popular by Fred Hatfield, which I believe is why it is all of a sudden taken a surge of interest, I guess, has happened since he passed away just a week or week and a half ago. People started Googling his name, trying to figure out who he was. If you didn't know who he was, I don't know why you're powerlifting, but nonetheless, compensatory acceleration training in the most basic of terms is using a submaximal weight, generally somewhere between 50% to 70%. Some have went lower, some have went higher, at a maximal force and velocity. Essentially, you are taking a submaximal weight and you are moving that weight through a full range of motion as fast and as physically as explosive as possible. Say an example, if your back squat is roughly a 500-pound squat, you would be using weight somewhere in the 250 to 275, maybe a little bit higher, just, on average, range for roughly 25 reps, which can vary as well. But generally, you'd see the traditional 8x3 or the 5x5, 6x4, lots of different ways to go about it, obviously. But essentially the way compensatory acceleration training works is that in the squat, bench, deadlift, all that good stuff, pretty much any barbell compound movement, that when you hit the bottom of that movement, if you're a raw lifter, generally speaking, your leverages are going to be worse in that position. As the bar raises, your leverage will increase. So essentially what happens subconsciously, say you're benching, 250, 275, whatever, and you're doing it for, 3 sets of 10, something fairly traditional. In a traditional standard, the way it will work is those first few reps until muscle fatigue starts to set in, you will essentially, most people will only apply enough force to complete the rep, which would make sense. Your body just wants to do the least amount of work to get the job done. So what happens is, say in the bottom, you're 275, you're actually pressing with 275 pounds of force to move that bar. As the bar increases in the range, you're still obviously applying 275 pounds of pressure to the bar, okay, maybe I said this wrongly. 275 in the bottom, you would have to press 275 or more pounds of pressure to get that bar moving. Now, as that bar is moving and it reaches past your sticking point and the weight starts to get easier, most people will generally reduce the amount of force that they are using to push that bar through. Even though the bar speed may not change, the actual amount of muscle force and fibers that they're using will reduce, because they just don't have to push as physically as hard to finish that rep. The whole point of compensatory, C.A.T training, to make it work, you have to move that 50 to 60% as hard and as physically explosively as possible. If you do not, you just will not create enough stimulus and overload to actually create a training effect. If you take your 500-pound squatter and I tell you to squat 250 5x5 with, say, 90 seconds in between reps or in between sets, and you do that and you do just enough to move that 250 through the range of motion for 25 reps, you're not going to improve off that. I mean, very unlikely to improve off that, especially considering a C.A.T cycle with, at least in the way that me and Sam Bird have done it, you will use the same weight for, 16, 20, 24 weeks. So if you just constantly do 250 with just enough effort to move it over and over and over again, not trying to improve the speed, not trying to improve the technique, you're not going to grow. You just won't. You'll get into your meet, or you get into meet prep, shit'll feel heavy, and you'll think I'm dumb and that the speed work just doesn't work. Well, it's not the case. You just didn't work hard enough. And maybe for some people it doesn't work as well as others. I do believe if you are a less naturally explosive lifter, like I am, in my opinion, Once you get into essentially, I think it'll work better for you. The better you get at being explosive, the stronger you're going to be, the better you're going to be at applying that force to heavier loads, obviously. But either way, the way it works, so say 500-pound squatter, traditional workout may look, for me, 60% would be roughly 275, 280, and you would do 5 sets of 5. And the reps would stay at 5 sets of 5 with that weight for probably at least 12 weeks. It may vary depending on how your training schedule and your competitions are lining up. Obviously, during peak, the weights are going to increase. They have to. I don't expect anyone to think that you can squat 50% of your max every single week, and that's as heavy as you ever go, and then you walk into a meet the next day and squat, a PR of, 600 pounds when you were a 500-pound squatter. I'm sure there's a freak out there that can do it, but it's not the average or most of us. So, as we go back to our leverage part, as with compensatory acceleration training, you come out of the hole, you have to explode with every bit of force that you can generate through your quads, hips, glutes, even your calves to an extent. I hate to say that because generally, if you're using your calves, you're going to do like a little calf press, which is the last thing you want because that means you are on your toes. But you're going to use every muscle you've got. In a cat squat, if you don't have the bar broke across your back, the bar will leave your back, which you don't want to see happen. Like the really cool videos you see of like Eric Lillibridge and stuff like that, where the bar is popping like 6 inches off his traps and everything. It's really cool. It looks awesome. It can get you hurt. It can break your bars. It can break your mono. The guy, your gym owner is not going to like you anymore. You could get hurt doing it. So. But that's essentially the same thing. If you explode as hard as possible with that submaximal weight, that bar should leave your back. Well, if you're not pulling down, obviously. Same thing with the bench press. Same, you could apply it to, I believe I saw Fred Hatfield using it in the, not necessarily with his training, but other people's training, the shoulder press, the bench press, the barbell row even. Just pretty much any kind of compound movement you could use it on, but for powerlifting purposes, it seems to be most effective for the squat, bench, and of course there have been, Andy Bolton was a big user of it in the deadlift. And so essentially, I've talked to a lot of people that say this training just doesn't work. Once again, I believe that they just did not necessarily apply the principles correctly. I have been told, I've talked to, Amit Sapir before about it, and Stan Efferding, and many other people who say that it just makes no sense that it would work the way it's worked. When I first started, about 4 years ago, my weight on the bar most of the time was roughly 250. I had about a 400-pound wrapped squat, which meant my max, without wraps, as much as I got out of wraps was probably, at that time, 350 or so. And I took that 250 and I worked with it for what seemed like 6 months, or longer. I mean, it was probably actually longer than that. It was probably close to a year. And then I did my first meet and I squat 500. Once I squat my first 500, I come back and the weight went up a little bit. Squat 6, the weight went up a little bit. Squat 7, the weight went up a little bit. Long story short, 4 years later, I am using 325 for the majority of my squat training, and that's, with cat squats, front squats, you name it. And, I have, depending on which douchebag on the internet you want to talk to, I have squat anywhere from 760 on the platform to 804 on the platform and an 815 in the gym that looked sexy. So I know it can work. I watched Sam Bird when he squat 915. Believe it or not, 80%, unless we were in meat peak, Sam did not have over 4 plates on the bar. So he had roughly 415 to 425 on the bar, depending on what gym or bar we were using. That's that's roughly 50, actually it's not even 50% of his wrapped max, which, so you'd say, I guess his max without wraps at best would have probably been around 800 pounds at absolute best, ever. So he was using 50% of his max for weeks and weeks and weeks and weeks and weeks and weeks. There's an article, if you Google his name, you can find it on Elite FTS, where he said he would literally use 20-week waves of the exact same weight. It would never change. No chains, no bands, none of that bullshit. Just the same weight over and over and over again, getting faster and faster and faster and making it perfect. He wouldn't get ready for a meet until that weight was just flying every single week. We don't care about heavy weights over here. With CAT training, it allowed us to train lighter. It allowed us to perfect technique. It allowed us to stay injury-free for the most part. It was much easier to get motivated. I mean, I know it's weird, but I'm one of the power lifters. I hate lifting heavy. I don't like lifting heavy. It destroys me. So generally, unless I'm in meet peak, I'm not lifting over 60% of my max. Speed, CAT training, and then bodybuilding accessory type stuff. It's worked okay so far, at least for my squad, I'd say. So, give it a try. If you have any questions, let me know. I'll answer them to the best of my ability, and I hope you guys learned something out of this video.